As far as markets, from your newsletter, you put the few cities that are growing: Raleigh, North Carolina, Gainesville, Georgia, and smaller,
Yeah,
large metro areas.
yeah, yeah. It's
Uh,
interesting. I think one of the notes on that was that it was the smaller of the larger metropolitan areas, say over 1 million people. I think there's about 56 or so metropolitan areas of more than 1 million people in the USA. And the ones that are growing more rapidly now are the smaller ones, the those that are, under a couple of million population. And that, Raleigh would be an example of that. Gainesville would be an example of that. And even areas that are in the 500,000 to 1 million range. I think some of that has to do with housing affordability. Uh, and I think that also people just maybe wanting to be in a less congested environment,
mhm.
that sort of thing. Um, but that has shown up to be a factor now. And clearly the larger regions, Southern California, the Bay Area, on the West Coast, Seattle, New York, all the Boston to Washington corridor on the East Coast, and then, Atlanta. Um, they're growing at slower rates. And a large portion of those regions do have do present a housing affordability challenge. There's no question. And if you look
Mhm.
at the percentage of, if you look at the percentage of household budgets that go to housing and transportation, it's a significant percentage. So, and what of that can manage down? Well, your transportation cost, maybe that'll be somewhat dependent on distance to work and commuting. But really, the big cost is having the vehicle and the insuring the vehicle, financing that. And and then the one that you can really manage is to go to a market that has much less expensive housing. So if you're in a market that can offer you a $400,000 house versus a market where it takes 1 million, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder how the inflation will continue to make an impact on the bedroom communities, right?
Yeah, and that's a big question. The whole issue with potential tariffs, sort of on again, off
Hmm.
again tariffs. Now, today,
Yeah.
I believe we're on again with some pretty significant tariffs on aluminum and steel affecting Canada, Mexico, and certainly China. And really, I think that's, as I understand it, across the board. That'll have some impact. I think just the uncertainty will have some impact. And and then construction costs. My own take on that is I really don't see much abatement in that area. We're going to have, I think, continuing inflation in Southern California, clearly because of the fire effect. There'll be a significant, and particularly on the labor side. And this also then relates to the issue of immigration enforcement. In the construction industry, particularly the residential construction industry, there's a substantial percentage of undocumented people working in those areas. So that's again an open question as to how much of that is going to translate into higher labor costs.
Have you been in touch with some contractors and that have been affected by that, out of curiosity?
Well, it's actually been, and this is where the question gets complicated because
Yeah.
ever since oh, I've forgotten the name of the program, the E-Verify program came in, uh, I think more than a decade ago. Uh, the percentage of undocumented people in in residential construction has declined. And I honestly don't have a handle on what the current percentages are. I know back, 15 years ago, for example, in Southern California, if you looked at framing contractors, and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contractors, there were percentages of undocumented people that were in the 25 to 40% range of the total workforce.
Well,
I think it's lower than that now. But how much of that is are people who have a questionable documentation status? I really couldn't tell you.
okay. Well, that has been wonderful. Um, Looking ahead in 2025, up until 2025, people were had us saying, hold until, wait, I forgot the exact phrase. I just had it in my mind. You would hold until 2025 and you'll be fine. And now they moved to 2026.
Yeah.
I hear lenders are extending their loans to their existing client base past 2025 now. Where do you think we're going to be this year? And do you think is a great or not so great time to invest in real estate?
Well, it's always a good time if the characteristics of the individual property are great.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can swing the equity or the debt to close the deal. Um, as to whether there are a lot of real bargains, that doesn't seem to be the case. The only area where that seems to be a possibility is with office assets, but then you're taking on the challenge of occupying that space and or undertaking a residential conversion. We've seen more of that, but it's really a challenge to do it.
Yeah.
Only certain floor plates work for that. And even if you have a floor plate that's small enough with, core to exterior depths that are short enough to have light come in for a residential unit, then you have the challenge of running utilities to support all the kitchens and bathrooms that you don't have in an office
Yeah.
plate. And that's really difficult. Um, Now there's some folks that have gotten pretty good at cracking that code.
Hmm.
But as to it being a large scale opportunity for just a passive investor, no, I don't think so. I think you have to really be, expert at figuring that out. And you also have to be able to sustain a long time period of no revenue until you can accomplish the conversion. So that means you'd have to be fairly equity rich and debt shallow to accomplish transactions like that. So it's going to be, so that's I think, a very limited area of opportunity. But, more generally, I mean, for most people, if they're not in the field, then the opportunities lie in the real estate investment trusts. And there's some good ones out there and some not so good ones. And a lot of those are very well managed and have a long-term perspective. So if I were to advise someone who wasn't in the field, but wanted to make an investment in real estate or have part of their portfolio in the real estate realm, I think that's where I'd say to look.
Awesome. Thank you, Pike. Very insightful. Is there anything else that we have not touched on that you think is important for our audience to know?
Well, I just think as far as what's going on with federal policy, keep your seatbelt fashioned.
Hold it tight so you don't crash.
Yeah, I mean, this is really unprecedented what's going on. And I mean, my own personal view is that there's certainly opportunities for greater efficiency in the administration of government. And it clearly, for example, in Internal Revenue Service, the computer systems and all need updating and upgrading. But a slash and burn policy similar to the takeover of Twitter, I'm not sure that's going to turn out so well in the government realm.
Hmm. Yeah, I listened to his audiobook, and it's really interesting how he has done these things. The way that he thinks is you cut so much that when it hurts, that those are the only things you put back in.
That's
So
right.
you cut a little bit more than what is needed so you can figure out what really is needed.
Yeah.
So
On the other
sure, it'll
hand, a
be
place like
painful,
Twitter
but
or now X doesn't process health insurance payments
right. No, yes,
critical.
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, social media is important, but it's not like a life critical
Yeah.
enterprise.
Yeah.
But, you know, the Medicare and Medi-Cal programs, Social Security, veterans benefits, all those kinds of things are pretty critical to
Oh,
people's
absolutely.
uh, livelihood. So whether you can take that approach of kind of cutting till it bleeds or till you hit the bone,
No, not for
I'm
those
sure.
areas.
I'm not
Yeah.
so sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not for life-threatening areas. I
Yeah.
100% agree. Well, Pike, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to what is it, news.aries.org for the newsletter. I think that's right. Let me just make sure. Yep, news.aries.org, ARES. That refers to the American Real Estate Society, which a few years ago took on uh, generously all the administrative side of doing that and takes care of the account on Substack and all. So news.aries.org. And then I'm always glad to answer emails at pike at urbannexus, URBANEXUS.com.
Pike, thank you so much. These links will be under show notes. I really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure.